Picture this, a fenced off lot in the middle of the Arizona desert. Not a car lot, just a flat parcel of land in the middle of nowhere with row after row after row of General Motors Saturn EV1s. Silent, forcibly abandoned in some cases, and a group of people outside of a chain link fence looking at their vehicle that they loved so much, destined to go to the crusher. Today, we're going to unpack why one of the best cars ever made was simply just erased from the face of the planet. Here we go. Welcome back to the Auto Nerd Podcast, where we talk sales, trust, and this beautiful chaos of the automotive world. Today, oh buddy, we have a interesting one. I wanted to break the mold a little bit. We were getting very car salesy there for a while, and that's kind of the point of this podcast. But occasionally, we gotta throw in some fun stuff. And today we have a mystery from the 90s about when a vehicle, the Saturn EV1, was virtually erased. These conspiracies, this scandal, mystery, whatever you call it, these shape how customers talk about EVs in the present day. I'm excited for this because there's so much rich content here that, quite honestly, if I wanted to create a whole podcast just off of this one conspiracy, I could probably go ahead and do so. The EV1 was a vehicle that was way ahead of its time, and it wasn't just ahead of its time, it was a full decade ahead. It wasn't like, "Hey, somebody's making a better headlight, we'll catch on in the next generation," or somebody made a navigation system, I guess we'll put that in our car later on. No, this thing had all the science behind it. The research was done, it was solid, and it was something that if it was kept in place, the automotive landscape in the United States would be very different. This is a vehicle that people got very passionate about. Like I said, it was lightweight, it was fast, it was deathly silent on the road like a lot of our EVs are today. Imagine driving around in an EV and not having that alarm on the outside, though. Drivers who had these things, they loved them, and I don't mean that they just simply thought that they were neat. They straight up wrote poetry about these things. They had EV1 meetups. It was like the American version of a Volkswagen Club. They gave their vehicles names. It was incredible. And overnight, General Motors recalled every single one of these vehicles and apparently crushed them all. Not too terribly sure about that, but that's where my research led me. A few photos out there seem to say different things, but I did find something interesting by an anonymous that is actually the poetry that somebody wrote about one of these. It's stinking adorable. It's called The Ode to the Electric Heart. I drove a whisper through the city, a red ghost on borrowed time, a future humming softly long before the world was ready for the rhyme. You gripped the road like promise. You ran like quiet rain. No pistons, smoke, or thunder, just pulse beneath my veins. The world wasn't listening. The boardrooms turned away. And so they called you non essential and took you back one day. I watched you from the chain link fence, your brothers all in rows. And I swear the desert wind stood still the moment the crusher rose. The metal bends in memory, hope folds under steel, but somewhere in the silent crush, you taught us how to feel. You weren't just volts in plastic. You weren't corporate sin. You were the whisper of tomorrow calling out from deeper within. And even now on highways lit, the taillights fading thin, I can barely hear you electric heartbeat saying, "We will rise again." I find it amazing that when the EV1 was around, the people that had the vehicle knew it. They saw the writing on the wall. But for some reason, this thing was the worst thing on the planet that you could have. And it's no secret that the vehicle was removed from sale. And shortly after, here comes the Hummer, the H2. And this really set conspiracy theorists in a very interesting direction. Because depending on who you ask, the EV1 was taken out by a whole ton of different conspiracies. It was either big oil, they say, big government, big auto, which I think is hilarious, small batteries, large egos, lack of vision, or a combination of all of the above. And like many great conspiracies out there, someone always has to lose. And in this particular case, it ended up being the consumer. And in some ways, from a car sales consultant perspective, they didn't really lose. They were promised a lease and they got the lease. And at the end of the lease, the vehicle was done. The only thing was is that General Motors processed this through recall. Now, big oil obviously saw the writing on the wall, and they're seeing it today. The proof is in the fact that you have a lot of these large oil companies that are now getting into the renewable sector. Lots of solar, lots of charging stations being put up, and kudos to them. The government could have potentially taken issue with it, with the fact that it was too technologically advanced for its time. It used lightweight materials that nobody else was using and was kind of given an idea of, well, what happens to those tax dollars that come off of oil. Big auto also was something that came up an awful lot. Is that with big auto, it's where's the competition? All of a sudden, you have this amazing vehicle that runs on electricity that you can charge at home for almost pennies. Why bother buying anything else when you have something like this that's going to save you so much coin? And then there's the whole small batteries thing. They take a lot of small batteries, therefore it's going to be very expensive, and that kind of played a whole role. But with every single one of these, it comes back down to one little thing, at least with me, is that large egos constantly get in the way and provide a complete lack of vision. Where we see people that will sit behind executive desks that will go, no, we towed the boat anchor of mediocrity here. But yet they'll say things like the brand is awesome and we're doing all these amazing technological things. At one point in time, General Motors did. They had something so incredibly technological that they could have clobbered the industry. Heck, they could be owning the EV space right now, and companies like Tesla, BYD, Hyundai, Kia would just kind of be sitting on the sidelines watching. Because the Saturn EV1 was that good for its time. The people that had them love them. You heard that poem. But big oil didn't want electrification. Dealers didn't love a car that needed almost no maintenance. The government, they kept changing rules faster than OEMs could adapt because of this particular style of vehicle. And General Motors leadership was literally internally split depending on who you had in the meeting being the loudest that day. People didn't know where to put this thing. It's selling really well, but it's having all these negative ramifications from all these other executives that have a complete lack of vision. I guess it only took 30 some odd years for them to finally figure out that, oh, wait, maybe there is actually something here. Maybe we can get in on this. Maybe there's a business opportunity that we can fulfill. Either way, in the end, the Saturn EV1 is still killed off. And this wasn't the first time that a manufacturer had come out of nowhere and decided to crush every single vehicle that owners had. I mean, check out this list. The Toyota RAV4 EV from 97 to 2003, Toyota recalled and crushed almost every single one of them until activists went ahead and chained themselves literally to their cars. But the thing was is that oil and hydrogen lobby pressure at the time was very strong. California had zero emission vehicle initiatives that were getting watered down. And Toyota said, hey, nobody wants EVs. And then all of a sudden, Tesla came out and proved otherwise. A few of these did survive, but the owners had to fight like hell, like the single owner of a Saturn EV1 to keep their vehicle. And then we have the Honda Pulse EV from 97 to 99. The deal was is that you can lease the vehicle only, just like the EV1. You could not buy one of these things. And I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that General Motors really kind of had this in a plan already, is that we're going to build the vehicle, you'll lease it, we'll cover our costs, and then we'll crush them all. And then here's a Hummer. But the EV Plus, but the Honda EV Plus Again, lease only. Honda recalled and crushed almost every single one of them. And then later, for some weird reason, just kind of candidly said, well, we built the vehicle to satisfy California's laws. But it doesn't make any sense as to why they would spend the money to simply go ahead and crush these things. But that was a decade ahead of something like the Nissan Leaf. Ford Ranger, check this one out. Ford came out and said, hey, you know what? We tried EV trucks before and it was super cool. So we're going to try it again. Well, 98 to 2002. Here's a Ford Ranger EV. They also said that they did this to be California compliant and they made it a really special truck. Some of these things, though, did not go completely to the crusher. Only a few owners out there were able to obtain their vehicle outright somehow. More than likely purchasing them through the leasing bank. Well, the leasing bank wasn't paying attention. At least that's what I guess here. This one I absolutely loved. The General Motors EV2. The vehicle never existed, but rumors for a long time were this prototype is out there running around Detroit. It never did exist. Actually, they came out with the idea of it, the drawings, the parts, everything was spec'd out for this. And they killed the thing. And then all of a sudden, here's the big SUV. This would be like you going ahead and saying, hey, you know what? The hell with the future. iPhone 1, massive success. Let's kill the iPhone 2. And you know what? Everybody's stuck with a Blackberry. Listen, I love the physical keyboard as much as everybody else, but that's not where the world was going, kinda like they are today. Now, DeLorean, I did a whole podcast on John DeLorean and the DMC and how he tried to rescue his company and the unfortunateness that came along with that through government pressure and government wanting to arrest somebody that day. Yeah, I said it. Now, the Tucker 48 was another one, the Chrysler Turbine car in 1963. That was just raw for let's not do this. And then also the Audi A2 from 99 to 2005. The thing used a full aluminum subframe, crazy light, 80 miles to the gallon, wild efficiently, stupid fast, and then in the end, they actually did have legitimate reason for stopping production on this car. So they didn't crush any of these, but they ended up going ahead and saying, hey, this thing's just way too expensive to make. It's no joke that aluminum is crazy expensive, especially when you're going to make it in a small car. You really need to crush the cost on that. And then there's one called the GM Impact in 1990. This was the EV1's dad. There's one in a museum somewhere. Ford made this thing called the Ford Think, and they immediately canceled that thing. They shut it down, and that was it. They recalled every single one of them, and basically they tried to just straight up erase it. But again and again and again, we see this idea that something is trying to stop electrification. And even when you take a look at the media today, you'll see a lot of people that are for EV, but then you'll see this huge mounting amount of pseudo evidence that's like, hey, here's why EV is bad. I've heard everything. It's bad for the environment. Well, why? How's it possibly bad for the environment? Well, you know what it takes to dig that thing. Okay, buddy. Listen, I hear you. And I wanna empathize with you here real quick, but I'm struggling with one little point. You dig up decayed vegetation from the ground, we pump that right up in the form of crude oil, and then you put it out into our atmosphere out the back of your car. Sure, EVs are bad. I love inhaling EV battery every day. But if we follow the money here, it gets a little interesting. Let's talk about why people still bring up Saturn EV1 and all these crazy pseudo negatives facts when talking about EV. I can tell you this right now. From my experience, this is not a car conspiracy. And as much as we want to apply conspiracy to it because it's fun and it's enjoyable, and especially today when everybody's listening to a different conspiracy of one kind or another, this is a business model, not a car conspiracy. This is how we can move forward, but also test the waters in some ways. But again, it does really beg the point, is there somebody else pulling the strings here? But it does make sense in some ways of why the EV came in and then was killed and came in and was killed and why manufacturers have made a good-hearted attempt as you look through history. It sounds kind of lame when you look at just like the EV1 as an example. But there are many cars, many more than I just listed, where they came out and then all of a sudden they were killed. And I do struggle a little bit with the whole big oil puppet master kind of conspiracy here. Because from a business perspective and a government perspective, EVs do something that we hear about a lot today is that they threaten tax revenue. And they really do. You don't need to fill these things up with expensive fuel and start to hemorrhage your paycheck. And so we hear now that a few people, when it comes to Congress, feel the need to write a bill to scam us and make it so we have to pay per mile to drive our EVs. Thankfully, there's no bill like that currently exists, but it is being written right now. So I'd encourage you to look into that, maybe fight against it because it's dumb. But the truth is that these did threaten multi-billion-dollar oil partnerships, and that partnership you really don't want to mess with. And also, when it comes to dealerships that threaten their service revenue, and when you look at the gas car versus an EV, EV's got like 50 and a gas car has like 300 moving parts. So it would only make sense that the EV maybe not fit into the whole dealership manufacturer business model of the early 2000s and the 90s. But are customers wrong when they consider, did it fit into back then? Would it have succeeded? And the answer is simply no, it wouldn't have. The economics on it were terrible. You have a vehicle that is so proprietary, then let's say the battery is to go. Let's say the motor is to go. How much is that thing gonna cost? It's not a world engine that's in 15 different vehicles from around the world spread across 5 different manufacturers. It's not a transmission that's made in Germany that is then split between BMW, Hyundai, Kia, and whoever else might pick it up. The point is that this vehicle did not fit, and neither did any of the others that I just recently read. The only reason that Tesla has the success that they had is that Elon was willing to grab the bull by the horn, so to speak, and go, I'm setting up everything, the network, the vehicles, the service, and he owned it. And at the time, EV1 just did not fit the script and needed a brand like Tesla to go, hey, this can actually be done, but it needs to be done differently. Back to the EV1. People fought to keep these things. And if you had something that you loved and the option was there typically to buy it at the end, wouldn't you just try? You call the bank says no. You say, hey, I want to buy it. And General Motors GM Finance says, no, absolutely not. We're taking those back. They must be destroyed. People tied themselves to their cars. They had vigils mourning their vehicles. All this leaves a scar. And those scars eventually become stories, and those stories become the foundation of how customers think today. Which is why today, the EV conversation in 2025 isn't really about range or charging, actually. It's about trust. It's about knowing that will this vehicle be here in a couple of years? And it comes out of that feeling that we will hear many people say, I never buy the first model year. Congratulations, you never buy the first model year. But why? This actually bubbles up not out of the reliability end of it. It bubbles out of the fact that manufacturers are all guilty of coming out with a car for a very short period of time and killing it. And then all of a sudden, just like EV, what about reliability? We're finding today that EVs are substantially more reliable than gas powered cars. But that's the thing, is that when you start talking about reliability, when you start talking about charging and range and you start talking about elusive topics, it becomes very easy for somebody to print something about how something may be terrible when you don't necessarily know much about it. Today's EVs are not the EV1 anymore. The world's changed. The cars have become substantially more technologically advanced and far more reliable. Charging networks, we actually have them. We didn't have them in the 90s. Also, the regulations have changed. You can have these things pretty much all over the place now, but the customers still carry that quiet scorpion from that era in their pocket. If you don't know the facts and you don't know the timeline, deep down, you're going to start to wonder, are we being pushed into something that the industry really believes in? Or is this something that the industry will simply just abandon again? And that, my friends, is why EV selling is not technical. It is all emotionally based, just like the vast majority of the things that we talk about. And we have to remember this when we start talking EVs with customers. Customers are not scared of the car. That's just a car to them. If anything, you can sell the ease and simplicity of it and they fall in love with it. but they're scared of being simply just misled again by another first year, another new idea. We have to give them the tools and be able to allow them to acknowledge the history behind these things. And we have to acknowledge it as well. We have to validate the customer's fear that also is complementary of the time when looking at something like an EV, but also explaining the differences between back then and now today. But never dismiss the customer's concerns. We have to listen. We have to lead with empathy. We have to lead with kindness and give them real stories about the modern day reliability. Heck, having an evidence manual wouldn't be that bad of a deal when somebody goes, "What about reliability?" Well, look, this was just done on this survey was just done on Teslas, and what they found is that the ability for the vehicle to go for a very long time shocked the world. Mainly, it comes down the EVs are just crazy reliable, like I mentioned a moment ago. But reassurance beats rebuttals every single time. And this is why we have to go into every conversation with a customer as though we are partnering with them. That is critical. I am here to help you. I am not here to sell you. You are not my product. Because if I help you, all of a sudden that MSRP doesn't mean that much and you really want this car. But if the Saturn EV1 taught us anything, it did teach us something powerful, actually. When innovation outruns trust, innovation just straight up dies. It's as simple as that. We're in a new era, and this is gonna decide the winner. It's not gonna be technology. It's gonna be that all cars are pretty much all the same, and they all drive themselves. Everything's different. The cars are different, the economy is different, we have a charging structure, everything's different. What's going to win in the EV area, if you want to have success there, is not the tech. It's you. You're gonna be the reason why they're gonna buy. When the playing field is leveled and the cars are pretty much all the same, the winner is going to come down to the fact of, did I work with somebody that I could partner with and trust, or did I walk into somewhere the consultant treated me like I was the product and I had to fight tooth and nail to get that vehicle? Congratulations on your Mini, by the way. But it's not about knowing the battery chemistry. Nobody cares about that, in all seriousness. If you have somebody ask you about the battery chemistry, they're probably just wanting to have a conversation about EVs, or they're testing you, or they came across some factoid on Reddit, and you're never gonna get this answer right. But do consider that they don't ask you what the gap is on the spark plugs. They don't ask you what the tire pressure is as they're looking at it while you're doing your walk around. And that's a pretty simple one to be concerned with. They don't ask you how many clicks it takes to tighten the gas cap. It's not a technological thing here. It's about being human. It's about knowing the human as well on the other side of the table and being able to relate to them. And it's about that conversation that you're going to have. To bring it all around, the history in automotive dictates our future, and this goes without saying for most things in life, which is why I'm pretty against erasing history because we can learn an awful lot from it. And when we look at vehicles like the Saturn EV1, it lets us know that it may not have been the fear of the General Motors top brass. It may not have been the oil industry. It may have been the fact that the vehicle was just unsustainable at that moment in time. And that brings me a little bit of hope for the future. EV has stuck around for a little while now, and people are loving them. People are putting many miles on them. This episode was really inspired by the fact that I've been reading a lot of EV news lately, and everybody seems to think the industry's tanking, and it's actually not at all. When you look at the numbers, every single month, we end up selling more EVs. People are figuring it out. And thankfully, in my personal opinion, the EV tax credit is gone. And this means, in my view, is that EV can finally stand on its own. And I really do believe that's what it needs because they are that Good. And when people start to understand them, all of a sudden you're going to see everybody come over to them, just like they did hybrid. So if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody that likes their automotive mysteries and conspiracies. And if you could, please shoot me an email, andrew@autonerd.com. Let me know what you thought about it if you like the slight change of direction. The tool for this week is going to be the EV Trust Decoder. I'm going to do this one in full Auto Forge fashion. So if you would like it, right down in the show notes, just go ahead and click that link and grab that tool. It's pretty easy. It's really good. It's going to keep you on track and it allows you to stay a little nerdy at the same time and have a little bit of fun with those statistics. But it really allows us to bring the customer back on in so they can see that, hey, these things are actually not bad. Actually, they're pretty good. And with a little bit of history behind it that you now have, you can get on that sales floor and be an awesome weapon because sometimes knowledge is power and a good story goes a long way. So stay curious, stay kind, and lead with caring. I'll talk to you all later. Auto Nerd out.